Her story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil right.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to Riff Worship, the podcast that attempts to answer the age-old question, what makes a riff? Why do we care about riffs? Talking about albums with riffs, sometimes to people who make really great riffs. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Paulson. With me, as always, is the great Baldini, the great Bald Hope, Dylan Adams. What's up, buddy?
Not too much, bud. Not too much. Been looking forward to this that we're doing tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. We are with some riff disciples. They have just put out an incredible EP, The Implications of Ascendancy. It's out now on Chaos Records. I'm, of course, joined by members of Ancient Tome, Naraka, and Zishan. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, man. I feel like it's great to be with another bald man. I feel like there's not enough bald representation, honestly.
Hey, I think he's still mad at me for growing my hair back out.
Were you bald at one point?
I was totally I used to bick it and everything. And so it was two bald guys and a guy with hair. And then now that I've grown it out and we've added Aiden on drums, it's like everybody's got hair except for him.
What's the method? I saw this video of Harley Flanagan years ago with this kind of buzz. The skull shaver. The skull shaver. What's the method? How do you attack it?
This is a very intimate question, man. I like that we're just getting straight into my grooming procedures. No, I do a straight 4-blade razor. It's real easy. It's real meditative. It's calming.
Do you put music on at all?
Yeah, I put wind chimes on, light some candles. Yeah, it's really sweet.
You have a much more peaceful approach than I do. Mine's the Apocalypse Now soundtrack. Just full on, just piece of glass the entire time.
Hell yeah, very metal.
I've had to deal with shit from him for years, and he's like, "Oh, got to get you a good hat." It's like, motherfucker, it just doesn't bother me.
I bet it feels
Bald
good.
is beautiful.
Exactly, smooth.
There's nothing wrong with it. I will eventually have to go back because my hair is thinning, but I'm just trying to rock it for as long as possible. But when I hit the Paul Rydell stage, I gotta.
Well, you gotta be. So Dylan and I have this running joke that if you anybody who plays an Iron Bird, they eventually start to thin or lose their hair. So anytime we see it, I'm like, they're great. They riff hard, but I feel like you got to sacrifice one or the other. Apparently,
I know I can see exactly where you're coming from because I can think of at least one more band where the guy plays an Iron Bird and he's losing it. So I think that's you got a good sample size. The data is there.
So what do you think? It's just some spiritual curse on the Iron Bird that just imbues itself into somebody's scalp?
You sign a contract with BC Rich when you buy one is that you have to eventually lose your hair.
I think Rutan's the one odd guy out.
Oh yeah, good point. Maybe it's a wig. Damn. Well, the EP's out. It sounds incredible.
It's great.
We love listening to it. How do you feel about it? It seems like it's been kind of a long time coming, maybe 3.5, almost 4 years between the last release. What are your thoughts? What's the response been?
I think it's great. It was really, really good getting Aiden in on drums because that freed me up. I feel like we were held back at least a little bit musically because I'm not that great at drums. We kind of started this band because I got a lockout space out here in LA and I just wanted to learn how to play drums. So I was just going into a room and just practicing by myself for a bit. And then my buddy mentioned, I've got a friend that wants to do a doom band. And I was like, okay, sure, let's do it. And we brought him in. So the first, few years of the band's iteration was I was doing the drums and the vocals at the same time, which is fun. But because I'm not that good at drums, the drums are very simplistic on the first EP. And I would just kind of fuck up a lot during practice or even live. So once we got Aiden in, it was like, okay, perfect. Now I don't have to worry about any of that shit anymore. He's really good. So you can do the drums and make them really cool, and I can just focus on the vocal melodies, and I don't have to throw myself off. Because when you're doing drums and vocals, you tend to kind of hit the vocals on the drum beats and you can't really go off beat because you'll throw yourself off when you're doing the drums. So being able to get out of that just made it perfect.
Yeah, he's got some like great like little flourishes. I mean, just, you know, obviously we talked to him previously around the time like Maze Envy came out. I love the tone of this record is like definitely, I love the cleaner parts, but like when it's just full on, just in your face, it is filthy and disgusting. Zishan, what kind of like, what's your setup? What are you using? I was so curious when I was like listening to it.
When we started, to Drew's point, you know, I think we were just like, it was COVID and life was miserable. And I think we just needed kind of like an emotional outlet. So much of what is on this EP, I think, is a lingering feeling of like, it almost feels like you're coming out of the cave, you know? And as far as equipment goes, I mean, I have a Chapman that I love playing. And it has such a rich and deep tone to it that I'm really obsessed with, and I feel is really hard to find in a lot of guitars. And then I have an Orange Crush head, and then you know I honestly use a ton of Drew's setup that he has for Severus.
He uses the exact same board I use for Severus. I just plop that down in front of him, but he only uses like 3 pedals on it. He'll use the tuner, obviously, and then the Earthquaker life pedal, and the my Hall of Fame, the reverb.
Yep.
Every now and then I'll see him. He'll toy around and he'll hit like my mod pedals, like he'll hit the Rainbow Machine or he'll hit this or that. But for the most part, like just the sun and the reverb. That's the whole sound.
I'm a minimalist, man. I truly believe in simple texture and as much resonance as possible. And I don't like to be in a situation where you create something on a record that you can't immediately repeat in a live scenario. So I kind of work myself backwards as it relates to what's going to sound good in a venue, what's going to sound good when it's rattling itself through people's chests, and then I try to emulate that on whatever we're recording.
It does sound cavernous. It feels like, I don't know if you got the same feeling, Dylan. It was like even the vocals sound like someone is just like shrieking from like in a hole, very Gollum-esque.
Gollum-esque. It's cavernous. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It is there's a overarching feeling of dread over the entire thing that is perfect.
Well, it's interesting that you guys feel that way, and thank you. It's very kind, because there are a lot of clean melodic parts on this, right? And they're a little bit shoegazy in some ways, but it does feel like we're trying to get you comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Or you're not really sure where it's going to end or where it's going to take you, but it's not going to be somewhere pretty, right? I think we try to follow that slipstream of how we make music, because those are the things that I think call out to me most when I'm in a space and I'm hearing bands. It's these meditative points of downturn, and then when they crash into you, you're like, oh shit, right? I mean, it's to me much more exciting than just being like battered across the face for 45 minutes.
Yeah. I also want to say this is like maybe the only form of music where you can be like, man, you could say like, oh, this sounds cavernous and Gollum-esque and bleak. And you're like, oh, thank you so much. Like, I really appreciate it. But
Totally.
we did notice that, you know, like obviously there's blackened elements, there's doom elements on this. There is quite a lot more to it than that. And we specifically noted the opening to The Way of the World is to Bloom. We were like, oh, that's like Slint. This feels like a Spiderland to us. I don't know if that had found its way into your influences or where you were pulling from on this record, but
no, but that's super flattering. That's a great album.
Oh yeah. It's like that. The spoken word part was just, I was like, oh yeah, it's like the breadcrumb trailer or something like that, you know?
The slightly verbed out guitars, the spoken words, like, oh yeah, this is Spiderland. This is great.
No, that's definitely a compliment for sure. Thank you.
What was cool about that was when we recorded it, like when we played, like practice it and stuff, you know, it's just like coming right out of the amp. But when Andrew was recording it, he did something that was really interesting. He was like, "Oh, we're not getting enough like from the guitar," so he's recording the cab doing the processed sound, but he stuck another mic right in front of Zishan's guitar just to get the string like plucking
That's
noise,
cool.
and then he put that on top of it. So that's why you can hear like his fingers sliding over it and
Yeah.
stuff. It sounds almost acoustic, and that's just because it's the raw sound.
I thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought it was just layered in there. Yep.
No, it's just straight up electric guitar.
That's cool.
And it's one of those things too, where like you use a specific gauge of string that you know is going to have a little bit of rattle. It's going to have that really warm, like rich tone to it. We just played a show, and the dude walked up to me and he said, "How do you make it sound like you're underwater when you're playing?" And I was like, "Dude, that's outside of being. It's either I'm in a cave or I'm underwater. Like I want to be in no other biome or situation, you know."
On the topic of Andrew, obviously, like Andrew Solis, he recorded the Siverus record. He'd worked on before. I'm assuming, just maybe that experience was, went very well for you. So, what was it like working with Andrew on a completely different project for Ancient Tome?
It was fun. We liked how well Maze Envy came out for Siverus. So the first EP that we recorded with what was his name? It was Alex, right?
Yeah.
We recorded, ironically, that was that guy moved out of a space and Andrew moved into that space. So we recorded Maze Envy in the same space that we recorded the first Ancient Tome EP in, which I thought was funny. But then Andrew moved to a new studio that he has now. And it was fun to like kind of be in a different artistic output with him, because he like produced Maze Envy. He gave us a lot of notes, and like we changed some things that we had written before he started recording it. But on this, he was just like, "All right, guys, let it fly." He had his ideas here and there, like recording the strings like that. But for the most part, he was just like let's see how we can get this to go. And we knocked it out in a couple sessions, and I thought it sounded great.
Yeah, I mean, we tracked live, right? So we were not to a metronome. We genuinely, it was me and Aiden in a room staring at each other, creating those cues and kind of just vibing to where the track was wanting to be. And that was really interesting for sure, because when you're trying to layer over it and get those specific kind of intricacies or hitting these, specific rhythms, when you're doing overtracking or doing your layers, you're basically just trying to feel it out, right? You're not doing it to a click track. So I thought that was really interesting texturally, and it certainly adds a little bit of life to it. I remember it's like something like a lot of the bands I started listening to really early on in my life were doing, like, the Misfits and stuff, like those old records that sound the rawest, or just them getting into a room and being like, "All right, I have 2 hours, let's knock it out," and just like banging out 4 or 5 songs.
Maybe on a topic of bands that we were getting into at first, what were maybe some of those first records you got? I'm assuming, Misfits was a big one for you. What were some of the other things you were listening to initially?
I think the first CD I ever bought in my life was Metallica's S&M album. I ordered that off of a sketchy website, like the first time I was ever even online, I think. It took like 9 weeks to get to me, and my mom was super pissed because she was like, "They stole my credit card information." But then it landed, and then I was like, man, I think I wore that CD out. But as far as like, the metal side of my life, it really came from like AFI, Misfits, those kind of, punk hardcore bands, and then opening up those CD cases and looking at the special thanks and then being like, "Oh, this band name sounds sick," and then going to LimeWire and trying to steal their music. And then that just kind of unloaded an entire new kind of episode in my life, in those early elementary years. And then it just stuck. But now, I mean, I am listening to to all of those same bands in a lot of ways, and then sprinkle in like, I'm not good at this because Drew will literally be listening to like, oh, I'm listening to insect hybrid warfare, egg laying, hatching, chainsaw death, and they have like 15 listeners on Spotify. They just like fucking rip, you know? I'm so bad about finding music that way, and he's so good at it.
Who were some of the first people that stuck out to you, Drew, where maybe made you want to pick up an instrument?
So I was really into like indie rock and stuff when I was younger. So it was actually like Neutral Milk Hotel was like the first thing I ever learned on guitar. I was, super hipster. I went on a lot. I was on 4chan a lot when I was in high school, like 2006, 2007 4chan, the music board, and totally different than what it is now. But like all that stuff really influenced me. So I started getting really into just learning how to play like the Blood Brothers or just random things, stuff like my mom was really into. Like my mom is a huge No Doubt fan. So like I've seen No Doubt live, and Gwen Stefani is one of the most beautiful women in the world. Obviously, everybody knows that. But I would sit there and like just learn how to play No Doubt songs because, even though ska is really dorky, like the actual instrumentation is really cool. But then I started getting like a little heavier. That's when I would already listen to Metallica and all that stuff, but like learning how to play that stuff on guitar like really changes your perspective, because when you first start learning guitar, at least in my case and some of the people I know, you get really focused on like scales and doing things the proper music theory way, and then you play a metal song for the first time and you're like, what the fuck is this? Like you're using every single note. Like you can't do that. That's not right. But wait, it sounds good. And then you start learning like, maybe I don't need to just play a major or minor scale for everything. Maybe there's other things out there. And you start learning Phrygian and modes and all that stuff, which is cool. But when we started this project, it was just supposed to be like as slow as we can, as big as we can. So I took a lot from like Primitive Man, especially as far as the vocals go. I was just trying to be Ethan a lot because he's got such a big, huge voice. So like the really long, drawn out gutturals is me trying to be Primitive Man, and I just kind of developed from there. And now I try not to pull like from other people. I'm trying to do my own thing, but it really does come down to them because that's what I was really, really into in like 2018, 2019.
Yeah, can't go wrong with that. I know that Good Charlotte was very formative to you in your early years as well. How does that fit into this project?
Oh, you follow me on Twitter?
A little bit, yeah.
Yes. My very first concert, my mom took me to see Good Charlotte, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous.
There it is.
Or Youth, or whatever the hell it's called. I look back, I have re-listened to that within the last year, and it doesn't hold up. It's very cringy, but at the time I thought that was so cool with my little faux hawk that my mom let me use temporary dye to make red.
I love it.
I did eventually grow out of that though, but no knocks to kids that listen to music that they think is embarrassing now. Like you'll grow up and you'll get over it, or you might still like it. Like there's nothing wrong with liking music that's pop or not quite metal, and you can still be metal and listen to that. Because I don't know if this was going to come up, but I'll just have to say it right now, dude. That Sabrina Carpenter album was incredible.
It's
all
not, yeah.
All right.
I think people can call me a poser or whatever, but short and sweet, it's pretty good.
I think it's so different too now because somebody going to high school now has access to so much more music, right? And it's like paralysis by analysis in so many ways, because now it's not about getting into an artist. It's literally like, okay, I like this one song. The algorithm creates a playlist for you. People are never looking at who the actual artist is. They're just letting music play, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And I think it's great, right? That ability to access music is incredible, but also it does take away from like the fanaticism that I think people that are a little bit older have for bands that they really liked, right? They had to stand outside of Tower Records to get tickets at, to go see a show, and they had to buy an album, and they had to read the CD notes. And it's like, you miss out on so many cool interpersonal opportunities because you're just having a robot tell you what BPM you like, or, what specific tone you like. I don't mean to be like the bald guy ranting against AI, but it's like that. I do feel like fundamentally the way that Drew and I are explaining, and I'm sure how you guys experience music growing up, is so different than, somebody that's a freshman in high school is going to experience music.
Absolutely. I know even with the slight age difference between Austin and I, the way I grew up and experienced music is so much different than the way he did. You know, I grew up in a very rural area of the South, and it was, you saved money, you drove an hour to the nearest music store, anything like that, and you bought that thing you were waiting to get, that you saved up your hard-earned money for. And sometimes it wasn't great. Sometimes you got it and you were just stuck with it. But then sometimes you scored like Morbid Angel's Covenant or something, and like you grab that and it's like, all right, world's changed. It's remarkable how different it is now. Everything's at your fingertips now for younger people, and it's so great, like you were saying, to see them have that availability. But maybe there's a little bit of nuance lost in that, with no one's just going to focus on, I have to hear every single thing that this artist has done, and then I want to hear side projects. I want to see what shirts they're wearing. I want to pick out that. I want to go check that band out. You don't see that as much as often, but then again, you've also got people getting into white noise bands on Bandcamp that no one's ever heard of, and they somehow have found it in, First Block Science or something.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I mean, there are so many pros to that accessibility aspect. But I do wish everybody could have that. I mean, for me, it was like, I bought a creator album and I was like, the artwork is crazy. I have no idea what this is. And the first time I listened to it, I was like, what is going on? And just, like you said, I was stuck in my room with my CD player. I had to listen to that CD because it was what I spent my $15 on. And then it was just like a fundamental life altering moment. But Drew's in a noise band, so I'm sure he's stoked that, some random kid from Malaysia can listen to his static for like 2 hours and be stoked. So that works out.
It's you just have to have a good community, like not just like the internet, but like the people around you to help you find more music. That's why like being in a band is cool, because you can all recommend each other things, and you'd find stuff that you maybe wouldn't have heard of for whatever reason. Like, I didn't really listen to until Zishan mentioned them, and I listened to it, and I was like, damn, nothing is growing in this garden. It's kind of crazy. And just like little bits like that. I always recommend people just like kind of going on Twitter and seeing there's like a really good metal scene that's on Twitter. You do have to deal with, some weirdos, and yeah, it is Twitter. So there's a lot of psychos and Nazis and stuff. But if you can parse that out, great recommendations for music. Same thing with 4chan. Yes, it is 4chan, but the music board is a little separate from the rest of the insanity of that. And some good stuff on there, as well as Reddit. There's some good Reddit communities to finding new music.
I advise everybody listening to not go on 4chan for any reason. I mean, you are within this slim margin of a white man who grew up on 4chan and are not like a complete psychopath. So
I truthfully didn't even know that it was still like a thing. Like,
Drew's keeping it alive single-handedly.
It's still kicking. When Maze Envy came out, I actually went on and someone made a thread asking about it, and there were some derogatory comments where people said we were gay, but at the same time, there were some nice comments where people were saying how good it was. So I was like, hey, you just gotta balance it. These are very unfiltered thoughts.
I know Aiden is originally from the East Coast, but are you guys both from California originally?
Yeah, I'm in Orange County.
Orange County. What do you feel about the scene currently? I mean, even just within the past like year or so, the amount of records that have come out that are just fucking unreal, between, this EP, the Sivers record. I mean, you work with Andrew. I mean, fucking Apparition and the new Nails record's awesome. You know, fucking we love that Swamp Beast record and Teeth, all those great bands. What do you feel like the scene was when maybe you were kind of first getting into it? How do you feel like it's changed? Have you noticed any trends? I'd love to hear about it.
I feel like and I've talked about this on other podcasts and stuff. I feel like the OSDM revival is finally like declining. There was a huge amount of it in like between like 2019 and like 2022, I want to say, where it's like everybody had their OSDM band. And I'm not saying that they're bad or anything, but it was just kind of like definitely the style of LA at the time. But as far as like our little corner of the genre goes for Doom, we've met like some really cool bands that we've talked to. Like we, haven't necessarily played a show with all of them, but just like, like we just did a show last week with Dog Smoke, who was really good, and Well Hell, and what was that the last one? Well of Human Kindness. Those are all like really cool, and I just never heard of them before. So it's nice to see these like smaller bands like starting to pick up and like come out and get in this like new generation of talent from Southern California, LA area, outside of it, and just starting to present themselves as like, okay, here's our take on what's going on right now. Like everybody seems to be getting a little bit slower, which is cool.
Yeah, it does feel like there is really not a Doom scene here in LA, right? There are a few bands, and every time they're on a bill, it's very specific and not complemented by, I think, a full, like on the East Coast or in the Midwest, you have plethora of Doom bands that can come together, and it's like a full Doom bill, and everybody knows what they're in for, and it's really exciting. When you come out here, what's exciting for us is we'll play on a bill and people are just like, what am I listening to? Right? It's so different from everything else that they're hearing right now or that is playing larger venues in LA, that it's exciting, right? To be able to be like, we're going to be the first Doom band that this person's ever seen live. That's cool. Or when you can get folks like we did that on that other bill Drew was talking about, where it's a full Doom band and everybody like is really slow and it's really fun and textured, and you can feel, the walls kind of shaking in a totally different way. But that's not necessarily what I think is dictating the LA metal scene right now. And I hope that we can be at the forefront of trying to create that community with some cool folks. I certainly feel like we're trending in the right direction, and being able to talk to you guys and getting out into the world definitely helps with establishing that some more too.
That show you were referring to was a benefit show, correct? It was in lieu of all the fires.
Yeah, the fire aid.
How have you been? How have you how's the scene been? How have you been kind of managing everything since all of this is kind of, I mean, I know it's not necessarily something new, and you've certainly probably, dealt with similar kind of, natural disasters before living in the area. But, obviously this was pretty horrendous. How have you been doing? How has the scene been doing?
I feel so, people always give California that bad rap about the wildfires and stuff, and that goes all the way up to the top of the country talking shit about it. But this was like so significant that I don't think a lot of people outside of California even realize how bad it was, because normally the wildfires in California will be a little more rural, like not necessarily right next to LA. It'll be like 60 to 100 miles away, and it's just like unincorporated, uninhabited, just like wildfire burning. It sounds scary because it's like 9,000 acres burned, but it's just nothing but dry land. But this was like significant enough that there were so many people that lost houses. And this goes back to me working at a hotel. Was my girlfriend works at a hotel in Pasadena. Her place went from 30% full to completely sold out in like 4 hours when the Altadena fires started. And then even mine, I'm at a hotel in Redondo Beach. We're 20, 30 miles away from Palisades, but we filled up, and, we're still getting people whose houses burned down and they just don't have anywhere to go. And Hilton donated, all these free room nights for people to stay. So they're still using it while they're trying to build their lives back together. Thankfully, none of us were, you know, immediately affected. Aiden was very close to there was a small fire in the Hollywood Hills. That was like the third one that I was freaked out about. And we used the same app to watch the fires called Watch Duty. And it was like the zone he was in was like 2 streets. And then the next zone was you need to evacuate right now. But his was like, be on standby. You're going to have to leave. And he was just waiting for them to tell him to go. And, you know, traffic was bumper to bumper trying to get out of LA at the time.
And I don't know if we've really been able to figure out what the long-term effect is going to be, because a lot of folks that we know, artists who were, you know, 4 or 5 of them staying in an apartment and barely making ends meet and being like, man, LA is a dream. It's beautiful. It's okay that it's a struggle and everything's super fucking expensive. But when this happens, it kind of reality checks a lot of folks to be like, I need to get back to Arizona or Idaho or New Mexico or wherever I came from. And I think a lot of those folks have gone to those states and they haven't necessarily come back yet. And I do think that there's this mass exodus of artists that we're hanging on by a thread, and then parts of LA burnt to the ground. And now it's really difficult. I mean, the job market's difficult. The economy's, you know, in a really strange space. Government's actively trying to dismantle every quality of life aspect that we have. And then, you know, I just don't know when these folks are going to come back and be like, all right, let me start making music again. Let me start making art again. So I'm crossing my fingers that people can kind of cross that Rubicon and come back here. But, you know, Drew and I are in a really privileged position where we have careers unrelated to our art, and we're able to stay stable. But that's very much not the case for a lot of people out here.
It's very worrying about, especially for Altadena, is, you know, they have all this burned down houses and all this rubble, and, you know, it's going to take several years for them to rebuild all that. And the thought that a lot of people have is that they're going to kind of get forced to sell their plots of land, because they're going to have to rebuild an entire house on it with no fire insurance, since they yanked all the fire insurance away. And some people are just not going to be able to afford it, so they're going to move away, and then there's going to be all this empty land that some, you know, corporate baron BlackRock institution is going to, you know, buy up and then turn into quote unquote luxury apartments in spaces where, you know, families have lived for 3 generations. You know, where there once was a house, now there's, you know, an 8-unit apartment building that sells for $3,000 a month for a 2-bedroom.
Fucking grim, man. Metal.
Yeah, it is. It is bleak, much like this record. But I am also curious. You know, I'm sure this isn't the first project you've done. How did you guys get together? Were you like playing in different bands? Like, were you aware of each other before you formed Ancient Tome?
So I'm a filmmaker on the side, and my DP Justin, we built a close relationship after a project I worked on, and he was like, "Oh, I have a roommate, this guy named Drew. He's super into metal, and he has a lockout, and he literally has nobody to hang out with, right? Like, or all the people that Drew was hanging out with, they were kind of being flaky, and I was like, oh hell yeah, man! Like, I'm in a spot right now with COVID and everything where I wanted to get into a space with other 30-year-olds and just feel shit, you know? So met Drew, and literally the first song we wrote together was Lamentation. Like, that just came out. It was the very first song we wrote. It's still my favorite song. It's the heaviest song that I think we have. It's the one that we end our set with. It's just crushing and bleak and really representative of, I think, how we were feeling at that time. And we pretty much wrote that song in silence, like no words exchanged. It was just a vibe. And I think once we had that under our belts, we kind of had to come to the reality of being like, oh shit, we're in a band now. Fuck. Like, we were just jamming, and then that happened, and then we're like, all right, we're in a band, I guess, you know? And now here we are all these years later, which is it's been really good to just be back and playing music. And you know, like I said, it's like free therapy every week. You know, you just go into a room with some dudes and light some incense, turn the lights down low, and make some music. Sounds really romantic, and it is.
That it's wild to think I couldn't actually find a link for it. But that song, ending this EP, being on what is it? Thought Form Guardian is the initial release.
We cut that out of the bad recording.
So I couldn't, I couldn't listen to it to compare, but had it changed much in the kind of 4 or 5 years? Was there much altered or?
Yeah, it was actually longer. There was two drum sections that we doubled that we cut back on the new recording, and it was actually a lot faster. So the current one is dun 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 dun, and the original recording was dun 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 dun. And I was oh, when I re-listened to it next to each other, it's very significant.
Yeah, I mean, it just significantly slower. That's the number one thing. It was slower, much more refined, I think, from section breaks and just the overall connective tissue of it. But also when you're getting into making doom, if it's not a staple of what you're listening to, it can feel really fuck, this is so slow. You have to be very confident with the way you're creating music. And I think when we made Thought Form Guardian, we just wanted to record, right? It was just kind of an extension of us hanging out. And we didn't have the confidence that we did on, the next EP, and certainly not the confidence that we have on this EP, which, I feel is a really great culmination of years of just us honing our sound and our friendship and our connection to the music. So I'm sorry that Thought Form Guardian is nuked, but also it's okay. You have 2 other EPs that are decent to listen to.
Well, on the topic of, this form of music, and, we're kind of hinting about some of the riffs on here, they're slow and they're very, cathartic and meditative. There's points in time where you almost kind of get lost in it and you're like, oh man, yeah, we've been just riding along with this for a while. One of the questions that we typically ask, guests on the show is, what makes a riff? What is it to you as a listener or a musician? What does it need? What do you look for? What hooks you in?
For this band specifically, it's all feel. And I mean, I guess that kind of branches out to most music. It's you can quantify it and be it's this many notes in a bar or whatever. But I feel for what is a riff, it's just a musical piece that, especially is guitar driven, that you can just kind of rock out and feel to. It makes your body want to move, because there's nothing worse than putting music on and then you just sit there and you're okay, is it still going? Once you put it on and you're you can kind of start bobbing your head and you want to move around a little bit, that's when I know okay, this is good, because I can't do that to music I don't like.
I would say for me, it's certainly changed since I started playing music again. I took a long break from it in my life, and now I try to think about writing something that literally gets people who are smoking or drinking outside of a venue to stop what they're doing and walk inside. So it's much more logistic oriented in my brain. And I think when I'm experiencing it or I'm listening to an album, if there's a moment on a track that makes me look at somebody else in the room to be are you hearing this? I need recognition from you that this is indeed a riff. You're feeling this too, right? I like the community aspect of what a riff can be, which is why I love the name of your podcast, because it is there are songs that are made or broken by a singular 30, 45-second section. And you're just I'm on this ride for this section and everybody around me is going to rip to it. And then we all move on. I like the singularity of it all for sure.
Zishan, you mentioned that you're a filmmaker and a writer on the side. Had some project coming up. When we talked to Aiden, it was very fascinating to kind of get into his world of being a sound engineer and kind of mixing films. You've put out, I'm sure it's been busy as hell within the gap of maybe that first EP to this one. You've worked on several projects. I believe did I see that you have a film that you're teasing? Is it a short film perhaps?
Yeah, so right, literally the 25th, what day is it? The 20th? Yeah, the 25th of February, my first feature film, The Build Out, dropped on VOD after a long film festival run, and it stars Jenna Cannell from the Terrifier franchise, which a lot of people know her from. Yeah, and my other lead is Hannah Aline, and she was in Doom Patrol, and she was also in Mayfair Witches, which is an AMC show. So that was my first feature, just dropped, and then I'm literally finishing up post production for feature number two, which is kind of the teaser that I'm sure you saw. We're crowdfunding some post production funds for that, but yeah, feature number two is about to be wrapped up, and I'm in a really crazy place where I have one project that's just getting out into the world and another one that's about to get out into the world pretty soon, and also having this EP out as well. So very busy, but grateful to just like relentlessly be making stuff.
So with finding out that you were a filmmaker and you're in this world, recently, obviously the Blood Incantation record comes out, and there's these long form videos for the album. You guys have the perfect kind of band to do something like that for. Has that been discussed?
It hasn't been discussed yet because I think all of my time and energy has been placed elsewhere, and I like compartmentalizing film and music in my brain as it relates to getting it done. But I mean, Emma Ruth Rundle has like a great 9-minute music video, right? That's intertwined with her narrative and the song, and it's super inspiring. And I would love to do something like that one day. And now, unfortunately, that you've mentioned it, I'm going to have to because it's a great idea.
It'll be
Love
for
it.
the album.
Yeah.
We'll go out to the desert for the album.
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, like watching the build out and even some of these, there's the, oh my God, it's the paranormal, where everybody's kind of in the support
Prefigured.
group. It was so beautiful looking. Like I really loved it. I'm like, man, it would be so interesting to see Ancient Tome like have some sort of, paranormal or kind of spatial. I don't know. Yeah, it would just be very interesting to see it in that context.
Yeah, I mean, the next album we're working on, or the album that we're working on is Dune centric. So we'll be out in the desert, and I'm sure it will be oppressive and psychological, and hopefully Drew will let me find somebody who can actually record it out in the desert too, because that's a place I need to spend my time and energy for sure.
Yeah. If and when you do make a music video, I mean, it's not the first band that you've been in that have a music video. I believe that's correct. To the Minds, was that like a slamming kind of death metal band that you were in?
Yeah, man, I think from 16 to, it's crazy. You're like the Nardwar of heavy metal here. It's interesting. Yeah, from 16 to basically, I mean, I'm 36 now. So for the past 20 years, I've been in and out of bands. Sometimes it's playing a 3 or 5 day tour with somebody or filling in on a record. And then To the Minds was just like very similar to how I met Drew and how that happened. There was a label that was interested in recording some stuff for us. They ended up shutting their doors, and they were like, here's your music. And I was like, sounds great. Let's maybe like play 6 months worth of shows. And then somebody was like, hey, do you want to get on our label? And I was like, no, I don't want to do that at all. Like, I need to get a real job. And I don't mean real in the sense that like you can't make a living making music, but at the time you could not making a living making music. Like all the touring bands that I was close to, I would talk to them and I'd be like, man, you guys are fucking crushing it. And they would pull me aside and be like, I'm making $12 an hour if I'm lucky. And I still have to work at Borders or like, like fucking Circuit City or whatever was
Damn.
open at the time.
Damn, RIP.
And I was like, that's straight up. Yeah. And I was like, oh man, I gotta not do that. So
I had a similar thought at the time, like when I was first when I first got into Siberus and stuff. Was I remember Mortiferum was like crushing it at the time. Like it was like right when the first album came out. I was fucking put that shit on all the time, and I was like, man, these guys are killing it. They're on tour all the time. And then I followed Max on Instagram, and I remember I opened it one day and I looked at his story, and he's just like slinging pizzas for the summer until the next tour, and he's just like working in a pizza shop, and I was like, oh man, this is the biggest band I know of right now, and he's working at a pizza shop. So like really puts it out there that like you can make a living doing this for sure, but like it's not going to be comfortable unless you are, Cannibal Corpse or something. So you gotta be in it for the love of the game.
Totally. Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. You have to be in it for the love of the game. You have to build a community of people who support you, and then just be like, man, if I could sell 2 t-shirts and a tape and a CD at this show, hell yeah, right? I mean, that's great. So that's why I think metal music is so much more interesting too, especially when you get into these micro niches. It's just like, yeah, how many doom bands do you know that are like making it big and like living in luxury? It's like it doesn't really happen. So it makes it that much more impactful when you do support their music and go to their shows and follow them on social media and do all these things, because it certainly makes a difference, right? I mean, for us, like every single time someone posts something about our record, we're just like backflipping with enthusiasm, because it's crazy to have so much music out there and have somebody take a second to listen to yours and support yours and prop it up and be like, oh, this really affected me. I mean, that's pretty incredible.
Maybe back on the topic of film. Is there anything that you've been watching as of late? Like we love sharing movies and stuff on here as well. I know you're a big Alien fan as well, but is there something that maybe you've seen recently that you think people should check out?
This is crazy, man. Following so much of my life and me just meeting you today, it's very impressive.
Oh,
No, I just watched Presence, which is the new Steve Soderbergh joint. Um, Fucking ripped, man. I mean, really deeply affected me. And that's like a bigger movie that, is made for people that have money and can watch it in a movie theater. I really enjoyed that one. I've probably watched Dune 2 10 times now,
wow.
to the chagrin of everybody in my life for the most part. And then I just went to LA to watch my third screening of this movie, Memoria, which a lot of people haven't heard of. It stars Tilda Swinton, but it's this really weird and slow, strange, like totally singular film. And it gives me the same feeling that I have texturally in my brain when I listen to bands like or these large expansive funeral doom bands. It's like I'm seeing the visuals of Memoria. So if you guys have an opportunity to seek it out and watch it, it's incredible. And then if you hate it, I'm sorry, but at least you learn something new.
I just kind of, again, looking at some of your work with you mentioned maybe in some interviews about the theme of like an alien abduction kind of thing. Are you stoked for that Spielberg movie that's coming? I hear he's like making some like wild UFO movie or something like that.
I'm pretentious, so it's really hard. I'm pretentious so to my detriment that it makes it hard for me to be like, yeah, I'm stoked for the new Spielberg film. Will I watch it? Maybe. I don't know. I'm much more interested in seeking out weird singular movies that, like, if I can find an indie filmmaker who's like, hey, I made this movie with $25,000 and it's miserable, but it has 10 minutes of like brilliance. I equate that to like hearing a riff in a song, right? Where it's like, I will deal with 60 minutes of bullshit if you give me 10 minutes of purity, So that's kind of what I'm seeking out more and more as time goes on. But yeah, fuck Steven Spielberg. I'll say it. Whatever,
I like that you said that. There's a movie, and maybe you know it. I'm sure you do. It is like an abduction movie, and I guess it's like based on maybe like a true story.
Oh, Fire in the Sky?
Yeah. The movie mostly sucks, but that last like fucking 10 minutes of it where it actually goes through some of the coolest shit I've ever seen. I was so surprised that it's just dog shit for most of it, and then it's like perfect.
Dude, you got to watch Communion. Have you seen Communion with Christopher Walken? Yeah, you got to check that out.
Hell yeah.
There's a sequence in Communion where he's like in a spaceship, like surrounded by these aliens, and you're like, I cannot believe this movie got made. It's incredible. Yeah, it's so strange.
I'm just now, even the fact that Christopher Walken's in movies are fucking so cool, where you're just like, yeah, didn't you hear about the Christopher Walken alien movie? I'm like, no, what? Like that exists? That's awesome.
Totally.
Drew, have you been watching anything as of late? Are you a big movie buff as well?
Yeah, that was my initial thing that I wanted to do until I realized like that was way too difficult for me. Was I written a bunch of screenplays like feature length that I just you send them to contests and they make you pay $80 and then they just reject it. So I just stopped doing that. But because of my friend Justin, who I was roommates with, who introduced me to Zishan, he's still in that world, obviously shooting Zishan's movies. So since COVID, we've been doing a movie club where during COVID it was great because none of us had jobs and we'd stay up until 5 a.m. just getting wasted, and we would watch 3 movies a week and then talk about them on the weekend. That is now tapered down to 2 movies, maybe once a month, because everyone's lives are back to normal. But we've watched some insane stuff. Like we watched An Elephant Sitting Still, which is a 5-hour Chinese movie, and the director killed himself right after it came out because they cut his movie. Yeah, and it's really good. So good. We also watched Jean Dielman, which is like a 4-hour Belgian movie, and it's one of the best things I've ever seen, and it's just about like the day in a life of a stay-at-home mom. I did just recently watch all 3 Taken movies back to back, because I also, on top of like, I love to watch really pretentious shit, I love to watch just total slop. At my last hotel job, I had a private office, and I would sit at my computer doing my work, but I would also have a laptop, and I would just open it and just play movies all day. So I, bumped my stats up, but I didn't want to put on movies that I really cared about, like to give my full attention to. So, that's where you watch, The Curse of La Llorona or The Meg or Megan, shit like that. So I love slop. I do recognize that it's bad and I will rate it poorly, but I can't stop myself from watching it. So when I saw that Hulu added all 3 Taken movies, I was like, I've only seen the first one. Might as well check all these out. Same fucking movie 3 times.
Taken is not slop, dude. The first Taken
is great.
Yeah.
Taken 2 and 3, garbage.
Has anybody here seen The Gray?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That one's
Fucking
okay.
rips. That movie rips, dude.
That's
William
that's
Neeson
alright.
fighting a wolf. So
that's the movie that Kevin Smith made the joke about, right?
Is it? What did he say?
Yeah, tell me.
About Liam Neeson being he's got a 3rd leg.
Oh,
Oh, he's got a big dick? I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. There was this constant Kevin Smith joke when they would just get blitzed on whatever podcast he was doing, where they're like, oh, you mean like Liam Neeson and his 3rd leg? Just it kept going for years. It's like, what fucking movie are they talking about? And then you watch it and it's like, this is great. I don't give a shit.
That movie is so masculine that I feel like somebody like Kevin Smith would have to start talking about dicks, because he'd be like, I can't stop. Like, it's just so aggressively dude core that I gotta start talking about dicks. I get it.
I had to I watched the Liam Neeson movie just to first I watched this I forget the name of it. I think it's Polish, but maybe it was like a movie that took 10 years to make and maybe never came out. It's weird as shit. It's like a sci-fi movie, and it's kind of about astronauts. They and then they almost like a civilization kind of gets birthed out of them being there, and it they ate. I don't know. It's weird, fucking it almost kind of felt like oh man, now I'm blanking.
What's it called?
Shit. There's it's like something the Silver Globe, I think. I don't know if that rings a bell. If somebody's probably screaming at their fucking computer right now. It's like 4 or 5 hours long, and it's just this big it's all just monologues, and it's all about faith, and I was like, I gotta watch something. So I watched this almost like an ice road trucker Liam Neeson movie that was this fucking kicks ass, dude. You're yeah, watch.
He's a great palate cleanser for sure.
Yeah.
It's
Sometimes it's really fun to watch a man over 60 beat up a bunch of people.
Yeah.
You can still watch Steven Seagal kind of do it, but I think Liam Neeson is still spry enough that it's fun to watch. We're getting a lot of really old action stars right now that need to retire. I love Stallone, but like you gotta stop at some point, man.
And yeah, he's looking like a leather handbag.
It's not good. He was fucking jacked as shit, back in the
Yeah,
day. Like
sure.
now it's like you shouldn't be this buff anymore.
Ooh.
You're doing way too much HGH, dude. But there is some slop that I won't watch, which is stuff like with The Rock. I think that's like devoid of soul.
Sure. Yeah.
So that I think there's a good like balance of like garbage versus corporate garbage, and you have to kind of find the right kind, because there's stuff that's very clearly made just for like the algorithm or for money, and then there's slop that's made because people, like, someone really wanted to make this movie, and they put their heart into it, and yeah, it sucks, but like you really feel it. But like when you watch
Megalopolis.
Yeah, I do think Coppola needs to retire. It's very sad. I was just talking about this, Zishan, with the Hot Boys, is that some of these old directors, like, you got to go out on a high note, or you got to take one big bomb and then just stop. So like Coppola should have stopped 20 years ago. He's hasn't had a good movie since, I think, Dracula, and retire, enjoy the winery, dude. Like you're wasting everyone's time. You're wasting your own money for this movie that's just not great. And I'm very afraid of that happening to Clint Eastwood. He's so old, man, and I think about a lot about what happened with Bruce Willis, because it was just so sad, because nobody knew at the time that he was going through, all his degenerative brain disease. But he just kept showing up in movies, and it was like, man, it doesn't look good. Like, this is so sad. And then you find out, like, they're basically exploiting him. And then now I think about that with some of these older directors, where I'm like, how much is Clint Eastwood actually directing? Or are they kind of propping him up, and his second AD is the one really running the show, and they just kind of put his name on it?
Right. It's like all those
just make me feel bad.
So red box type of movies or whatever. I forget that fucker's name, who's like in a reality TV show. He just churns out like, here, I'm gonna throw all my money at a big name and then just pay no one else, and it's just the worst thing you've ever seen.
It's just sad, like I want to see these guys like have a good legacy. Like, there are exceptions, of course, which is like Scorsese. Like, Scorsese's super fucking old, but man, he's fucking putting out great movies still to this day. He had his incredible heyday in the 70s and 80s, maybe slumped a little in the 90s, although I think Bring Out the Dead is his best movie, and everyone thinks I'm crazy for that. Just barely right above Last Temptation. But like, even now, like, Scorsese's still crushing it. I just wish like other older directors could kind of like realize, like, all right, I gotta get out of the game, man. Like, you're tarnishing your legacy.
Is every podcast you record this so far off the base, or are we just ruining your whole life?
No, this is. I hope I
didn't.
Oh hell yeah! Okay, great.
Is this okay? I hope I didn't derail it.
They did this with Aiden too. Don't worry.
Oh hell yeah! No, it's great. It was because when I listen to your episodes, they're so like succinct, and everybody feels like they have their shit together. And then Drew and I are just like, yeah, dude, Christopher Walken and Aliens, and like, fuck Steven Spielberg.
No, man, this is great. Fuck riffs. I don't know what's Martin Scorsese doing. No, I'm kidding. You guys do have a handful of shows coming up. Are they pretty much mostly all local? I think I saw a few. There's one, I think, was it Nectar? Is it a coffee shop that you guys are?
Dark Nectar. Dark Nectar is a very, very cool spot in Atascadero for people in California that know, like San Luis Obispo, Paso Robles area, like Central Coast.
Yeah. I don't mean to cut you off, but we interviewed the guys from Laceration, and they talked about the same spots where they met Matt from Exhumed.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's sweet. Like, they've kind of created this little space. So yeah, it's a coffee shop, and they also serve beer, which is great. But it's just run by this like really tight knit group of people. I don't know if you guys know Necropsioter, but John from there, he books that. He's helped set that up. So has his brother Michael from Mephitic Corpse. So they're very much like a staple in that, and that's like really driven a lot of shows to go and play Dark Nectar. So it is a coffee shop. So there's no stage. You're playing on the floor, in front of some bookshelves, and then just your amps behind you, and then there's just a crowd right in front of you. But that place is so much fun because it's all ages. So there's just like a bunch of teenagers that show up and they go crazy, like they love it, and it's fun to see like these younger kids just like go and they just start throwing down and moshing and stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's like when these venues just create community, right? Where they're just like, hey, we're going to do this. And people do show up because there's not a ton to do out there. So if you get one venue that kind of strikes a little bit of a match, people do see the smoke and they start coming out, and I think that that's really admirable and cool. And it's different when you're in LA or these larger cities where there's 15 venues, but when you go to these spots where there's only one or two, it's like you're going to get people that are just like, I want to go see live music. I don't know what I'm going to see tonight. And it's going to be a total surprise. And we love playing to crowds like that for sure.
It's almost like that like fabled third place that has been coming up in conversation a lot, where it's like younger people don't have like a place they can go to that's not like my house or your house or, the park. Like somewhere where they can go and they don't have to spend a bunch of money to hang out. It's like $10 ticket and then you just go have fun for the night.
Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. With everything, the EP, I definitely want people to listen to it and sit with it and check it out. But looking ahead, 2025, it sounds like, obviously there's a couple live shows coming up. You also I have heard, and I believe we've talked about it here with, the debut full length. Is there anything else that you would want to accomplish in 2025, whether in music or in life? What do you hope people will see from Ancient Tome in 2025?
I'm hoping to write out the rest of this year. Hopefully we have the album finished being written. We've got like 3 songs. Two of them are basically done. Got to finish up the third one, but we want to do a full album, like not an EP, not singles this time. That is going to be Dune themed. So I don't think that's going to get finished probably this year, but I would assume early 2026. I would love to go play Mexico again. We played Mexicali last year, and it was awesome. We had done it with Severus before, so it was really cool to come back with a different band. And like, even Aiden wasn't in Severus at the time, so like he got to experience it. Like, really, really great group of people down there. So I would love to do that, and I would love for us to hopefully travel like a little bit more. It can be hard. Those little life constraints can kind of bring it down at times, but we absolutely are still, grinding it out and stuff. I'm hoping next year, we just barely missed the cutoff, but I'm hoping next year we can do Disemboweled God Fest in Seattle. Because that was when Freiburg ran that last year, and that shit was crazy good, like such a great fest. So I would love to do that again with this band and just kind of be able to come back in.
Yeah, I want to do more stuff like this, get to know guys like you. And these conversations really make me feel, electric and excited because there's so many connections to make and there's so much time we can spend talking about music and supporting the scene. And I would really love for 2025 to be something we look back on and think, oh shit, we were a critical part of making doom music a part of the LA fabric, right? Along with so many other great bands that we play with and know. And obviously write new music and get into that, but we're definitely not in a rush to get all that stuff done. I would rather drill the songs that we have and introduce them to hundreds and thousands of new people. And then when we feel like we've really exhausted, this EP, to jump into the new stuff, because we don't have the privilege of being in the studio 2 or 3 times a week. If we're lucky, we'll get in there 3 times a month. And that's just, I'd rather hang out with my boys and have a good time instead of having this like looming dread of, we got to finish these songs, we got to record this album. So I think 2025 will just be a good time for us to have conversations like this and hang out with people and play new venues and play with, great new bands that we've been admiring for a lot of years, and share those experiences. I know that sounds like cheesy and cliche, but that's why I'm in a band. I want to have the community and the ritual of just like creating in a space for an hour and then having to move on with our lives.
Yeah, I love that, and I hope that happens. And maybe some bands you admire or things you've been listening to. Maybe just before we close out, maybe go around the room and just share some recommendations of things we've been listening to as of late. Whoever wants to start, whether Drew or Zishan.
I'll start because Drew's going to go on a long tangent about all of his 12
Carpenter back up.
Yeah, exactly. No, I've been really fucking with this band called Vital Spirit. I don't know if you guys have heard of them, but I don't know anything about them, who they are or whatever, but it's like a very specific type of black metal that I'm just obsessed with, and I've been listening to that album nonstop. I've been also listening to Hauntologist, which that rips. I mean, that drop they made, I think it was a few months ago, or sometime in 2024. I'm really bad about keeping track on that stuff, but just like an incredible album, so diverse and nuanced, and has all the trappings of black metal, but also introduces a lot of other cool components. So those are the two things that I think have been really influential for the past year or so.
Drew, what have you been listening to? Sabrina Carpenter, nonstop.
Short and sweet, dude. All right. Yeah, Espresso is a great song, but Bedchem is better. I'll say my other semi-joke listen is Dave Blunt's. Everyone gives him shit, but god damn, that guy can put a fucking song together and he can rap. As far as and also ever since the Super Bowl, I've been like revisiting all of Kendrick Lamar's albums. So To Pimp a Butterfly is still his number one, and then Good Kid, and then Damn. But I'm kind of iffy on Mr. Morale, but definitely like I can put on To Pimp a Butterfly anytime. But as far as metal goes, Dysphorectomy, really good slam. So Splatterhouse, which I've been listening to a lot, and I tell everybody this. There's a 19-year-old in Massachusetts whose project is called Genophobic Perversion. Fucking crazy. He plays an 8-string guitar, he does all the drums and the vocals, and I shout this kid out all the time, and I'm gonna look right now, and he's got 400 monthly listeners. So please listen to him. He's really good. The new Final Resting Place album was great. And I think Zishan was trying to talk about insect warfare earlier. I will put on World Extermination any day. Unfortunately, there is an AI band also called Insect Warfare.
I was so confused the other day. I was like, why is it like they're like putting out like singles or something really weird? I was like, what's happening? Yeah. So it was an AI thing.
Really, really pissed me off because Spotify finally split it off, and now it's a separate project.
Okay.
But the AI project has 20,000 listeners, and the regular one has 16. And I think that should just be patently illegal. I think you should get hanged if you do anything like that. That's not cool. And it's been kind of found out who the people are that are doing it, but it's not good. It's not chill. Very, very uncool stuff. But the actual Insect Warfare album from like 10 years ago, that's some of the best like grind I've ever heard. Speaking of grind,
I told you, I literally told you he would not stop when you asked him.
Oh, I love it.
I'll cut it down.
I'm bad about it too.
Just a few more. Speaking of grind, I gotta shout out my boys in Mephitic Corpse. That new album, insane, so good. The drums on Grizzly Vomit on Self are so fucking good. There is a band called Bedsore. Spin.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know why people are not constantly listening to these guys.
That newest release is rad.
I feel like it's so great. Shit. Yeah. I feel bad, and maybe it was just because it was like end of the year type of thing where like maybe people it got swept under the rug.
Yeah,
fucking check that
fell
record out.
Right at that kind of weird gap.
Yeah, it's a bummer because I want to see those guys progress because like no one else is putting an organ into their music right now, and they know exactly how to do it.
So since we're getting a little long-winded on this one, I'm going to add one. I found an album recently by the band Abduction. It's their newest release. If I can pronounce it right, it's Existentialismus. It's black metal, but it incorporates all these other different elements of like experimentation and just abstract art. It's fucking crazy and it's great. And it just kind of hit me out of nowhere with it. But my actual recs for this week are Wake's newest single, You Swore We'd Always Be Together, which is coming out on their newest release, The Return of Magik, which will be released on March 14th, I believe. First release in like 13, 14 years. They're from Arkansas. It's where I'm from originally. The shit is bleak. It's heavy. It's amazing. There's all this new instrumentation going on in the band that I've never heard before. I've actually just bought my ticket today to see the release show in Nashville. I can't wait for that shit. That album's going to be fucking great. And then the newest Conan single, Desolation Hex, which is going to be on their album Violence Dimension through Heavy Psych Sound. Been looking forward to this release for a few years. They just recently added a new bass player to their lineup, which is Dave Riley, formerly of Fudge Tunnel. This stuff sounds a little bit more like Amphetamine Reptile bands, maybe some Jesus Lizard, just really trashy stuff, but it's still got that fundamental kind of Conan sound with those low fucking tuned guitars. And then for whatever reason, I dove back into a couple classic Rush albums with 2112 and Hemispheres.
Oh yeah.
Eat that shit all up.
Hell yeah. I just got a couple this week. As of recording, the Vacuous record that just got released on Relapse, In His Blood.
So good.
Incredible record. Wasn't familiar with them before. London-based death metal band. I mean, it's grimy sounding. The fucking album cover is grotesque, and I mean, it's got like some punk leaning stuff and some tons of riffs. Definitely some experimentation. Check out like Hunger, Immersion, No Longer Human. Great tracks on that record. And then kind of looking at some of their background, I found another group through this band. I believe it features one of the members of Vacuous, Thundering Hooves. They put out a record in 2022 called Radiance, 2-piece black metal project. Really great guitar record, got a ton of riffs, but then like it's super melodic and has like Iron Maiden kind of guitar harmonies on it as well. Super fucking sick. And then one more, Ancient Tome, The Implications of Ascendancy. Don't be a chump. Get that fucking record. It is out now on Chaos Records. Zishan and Drew, thank you so much for joining us this week. I really appreciate it. And it was so fun to get to know you guys and talk to you about this record.
Thank you.
Oh, what a pleasure to get to know you guys, and thanks for everything you do for the scene. I mean, it really it makes a difference for sure. So thank you for having us.
You can follow us at Riff Worship Pod on Instagram and Twitter, whatever. But for myself, for Drew, for Zishan, for Dylan, we'll be back next week with something else. See ya. Bye.